Hello guys, my name is Benjamin Seda, if you don't know already, and today I want to talk about self-sabotage. Very often I find that when I get to the bottom of any problem I'm facing in my life, I'm the one who's ultimately responsible for creating it or making it worse than it needs to be. Anytime you're facing a problem or anything unpleasant in your life, it's incredibly easy to get caught up in the story and get swept up in ego around the problem. I myself was guilty of doing this almost all the time until a little under a year ago when I had an experience that forced me to change and stop looking at the world and my problems in this way. I found that if you look close enough, you'll see that anytime somebody comes to you with a problem, there is an element of self-sabotage in the mix. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. This is by no means a definitive guide. I'm not Jesus, I'm not God, but these are the frameworks and rules I found are helpful to keep myself accountable and prevent myself from turning a bad situation into a worse situation. The first and most important thing you can do to stop self-sabotage is to reset expectations. I was recently having a conversation with a friend and she was telling me that she was having issues at home with her grandfather and conversations around money in her house. She would regularly get upset over the situation and say that there was nothing that she could do about it to change it. Every time she would come home, her grandfather would make rude, snarky comments about how she wasn't making enough money and she wasn't making the right decisions about her career, and that she should do more in order to make more money and be more financially secure. As someone who's already working full-time, she found this to be incredibly stressful to her and to her life to have to come home to someone nagging to her about money and working more when she would come back from a full-time shift and working all day. And the root of the problem was that all of her conversations with her grandfather would revolve around money and her career choices. The first thing I told her was that you need to stop complaining about it. That's first and foremost, which may sound bad, but the extra negative energy that she was adding to the situation by complaining about it and being negative about it really only made it worse. And this is why resetting your expectations is so important. First and foremost, if in one of your relationships, you are experiencing recurring negative actions or behaviors, it is on you to start expecting this type of behavior from that person. Set a new expectation in your mind that this is how this person behaves and acts. And once you come to expect this type of behavior from them, it no longer has as tight a grip on you. You can mentally prepare yourself for it before interacting with them and thus prevent yourself from being as emotionally afflicted by it. Not only is it incredibly important to reset your own expectations, but it's arguably more important to establish communication with that person and reset the expectations with them for your relationship moving forward. All relationships, whether they're romantic, friendships, familial, between you and your family, they need to have a set of expectations in order to be productive and healthy for both of you. Because at the end of the day, no one has a relationship, or no one should have a relationship that they don't get something out of. Relationships should be mutually beneficial, whether it's, again, with your family, whether it's romantic, or whether it's a friendship. Coming to the other person and almost verbatim, very clearly saying, I'd like to set the expectation of how I'm going to behave in this relationship and what my role in the relationship will be, and how you're going to behave in the relationship and what your role will be this way or that way moving forward, is incredibly important. And from there, this is where, if you're going to argue or if you're going to have disagreements, this is where they should be, because you can hash it out and come to an agreement and a compromise of what you're looking for from the relationship and what they're looking for. And this way you can both be satisfied and happy and create a healthy relationship. But the caveat here is that if you fail to have these tough conversations, if you put them off, you save them for another time, or you avoid them because yes, they are very uncomfortable, you're sabotaging yourself and you're sabotaging your own relationships. And this brings me to my next point, which is to set boundaries. It's important when communicating about expectations that you also set boundaries for the relationship. Boundaries are the confines within how a relationship or a situation is going to happen. You can set boundaries in a relationship for what's okay and acceptable and what isn't, but also you can set boundaries with yourself and a situation. An easy example of this would be setting financial boundaries by making a budget and saying, I'm not going to spend more than this amount. And if you spend more than that, you have only yourself to blame and you have to hold yourself accountable to reach your financial goals and to stay within your budget. In the case of my friend, I told her that she needs to set boundaries with her grandfather about what she considers acceptable and what isn't. I told her that she should set two boundaries with her grandfather. One, that all of their conversations cannot revolve around money or her career path. And two, that any conversations about money or her career path cannot involve snarky, rude comments or belittling or overbearing criticism of any kind. This way, once the boundary is crossed, you have full license to say, you know what, this is not how I want this conversation to go, or you've crossed the boundary of what we've decided is acceptable in the relationship, and you can see yourself out of it. And this is why boundaries and expectations are so important. Once you communicate and set these boundaries and expectations, both of you know exactly what to expect out of the relationship and where your relationship stands. It's very clear, it's very black and white, and there's no ambiguity. I find that when there is ambiguity in relationships, where you stand and what's to be expected is when a lot of problems arise. And this means that if something happens that is within your set of expectations and boundaries, you can't get mad over it because it's been what's agreed upon between the two of you. It's very easy and convenient to just do nothing, to set no expectations or boundaries and not have those tough conversations and just blame the other person or the situation when it continues. It's easy to do this because it removes your responsibility from it. If you can blame someone or something else, then you can claim that it's not your fault and you don't have to do the tough work of taking responsibility for your part in the situation. And this brings me to the third and perhaps what I think is the most important piece of this, which is to take responsibility. Once your expectations are set, even if they're low or they're not the expectations that you'd like, you have to take responsibility for them. In the case of my friend, she knew this behavior was to be expected, yet every time it happened, she would complain and get upset over it. And that's when I told her, at what point do you take responsibility for this? At what point do you take responsibility and ask yourself, what part did I play and what role am I playing in my unhappiness in this situation or in this relationship? And oftentimes, this is where a lot of the self-sabotage lies. Knowing what to expect and still getting mad about it anyways. In this scenario, you are the only one to blame. Another common thing is knowing what actions to take or knowing what you should do and still not doing it. This is the most important part, and this is where you must take responsibility. Otherwise, you're competing and playing against yourself. You're shooting yourself in the foot. It's like being angry that the leaves fall in the autumn or that it snows in the winter. You know this is to be expected and guaranteed, so who are you and what right do you have to be mad over this? It's just like the Stoic Epictetus says, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. You are only as affected by something as much as you let it affect you. Taking responsibility is not only a good thing, but it's necessary. When you take responsibility for something, it's empowering. Taking responsibility means you own the outcome and you are directly responsible for it. And this brings me to my final point, which is to control the externalities that you can. In the case of my friend, I told her that the solution was very simple. She could either move out or get over it. It's so easy and convenient to say, oh, but it's not that simple, but it truly is. After you have all the conversations that you can possibly have, after you set the expectations and the boundaries that you possibly can, after every external solution has been exhausted, the solution has to come from within. Your job is to make peace with it. And in order to do that, here are some important things I found helpful to think about and reflect on when I find myself in situations like this. One question I like asking myself is the energy I'm bringing to this making it better or worse? So in the case of my friend, is the energy she's bringing to it by complaining and getting upset over it making the situation better or worse? In her case, it was really only making the situation worse and more unbearable. And when I find myself in situations like this where I can't control everything and all I can control is my reaction to it and my set of expectations, I find it really, really important to remind myself that no matter what, everything will be okay. Being too zoomed in on the micro and the problems in the here and now lacks the perspective of the macro. Most problems are super temporary, and I find that if you are to mentally fast forward yourself into a month from now, 3 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, you'll find that most of the problems you're facing today won't be problems you'll always be facing. And I find it very easy to find solace in that. And if you're watching this video, I imagine you're on the younger side, so I feel confident saying that whatever problems you're facing today, do as much as you can about them, take responsibility, do your part. But when it comes to the things you can't control, just understand that eventually everything will be okay, as long as you're on top of it and you're proactive about making things okay. And an exercise I've been using to deal with the present moment and deal with the problems that come up in the day-to-day is to label things as pleasant or unpleasant and nothing more. If something is pleasant, I can show gratitude and be grateful for the pleasant thing that's happening to me. And if something is unpleasant, I can just simply label it as unpleasant, get to the bottom of why it's unpleasant, and figure out how I can change it. This is important for just acknowledging the present moment as exactly as it is and labeling it as such. It's really easy to get caught up in the story of what the problem is and what's going on and create a whole narrative around it and intertwine your ego in it and devolve into victimhood. But I find that when you simply label things as pleasant or unpleasant, it helps keep a realistic and objective view of what's happening, and it makes it easier and much more bearable to deal with the present moment and be able to start embracing it. And this exercise of labeling things as pleasant or unpleasant is something I got from Corey Mascara, who's a meditation expert, and he does a lot of guided meditations on the app Simple Habit. This isn't a paid sponsorship. I don't work with Simple Habit. I have no relationship with them, but I find the app to be very, very helpful. And Corey Mascara's teachings inside and outside of the app with his guided meditations have been very, very helpful and impactful to me. So I'll leave a link to some of his stuff in the description. And if you guys like this type of video, then I highly suggest you follow me on Instagram, because I talk about topics like this in my captions and my stories, and I post pictures relating to men's fashion, lifestyle, personal development, entrepreneurship, and everything else. I also have a newsletter in which I talk about these topics in depth. I talk about stoicism, productivity, business, this, that, and the other. If you'd like it, then I highly suggest you subscribe to that as well. And if you can't tell, my brain is done from this video. I have beautiful snowflake on my lap. I hope you guys are having a great day. Stop fucking self-sabotaging. Tell them, snowflake. I'm kidding. Have a blessed day. I'll see you guys soon.